way folks can watch it who weren't able to come today. So without further ado, Maggie and Momo, take it away with incorporating inclusive stories.
We just want to first say thank you, Shannon. This is not an easy job, and it's day 2 of Forward Movement, and we think you're killing it. And we appreciate you so much, and thank you for being awesome and being ready to navigate this with us. So thank you, and thank you all for being here. This is something that we feel really passionate about. So I just want to say that first.
Yes, and
thank you.
Yeah, and feel free to turn your cameras on. So this is like a conversation. Yeah, we want it to be welcome. If you're comfortable with that, we would love to see your faces. And
yeah,
keep
no
it like
pressure.
A chat.
No pressure, but if you'd like, that'd be great. I'm Maureen. I go by Momo. My pronouns are she, her.
I'm Maggie. I am also she, her. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
We're very blessed to be able to share this today.
Just one more shout out to Liberate Artists and Jerry Brown, who is the mastermind behind all of this. I really do want to, oh yes, baby. See, that's good. See, yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if y'all could see, but Maggie also has a baby inside of her body. Right
I am due, this Friday is my due date. So, we're here.
So yeah, so if you're watching this on YouTube, all y'all, what was your excuse?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
So we just wanted to just kind of start in saying, this is not meant to be necessarily a lecture. This is more meant to be kind of a conversation. And, we all work in this field where we're constantly evolving and growing. So we want this to be just welcome to feel free to ask questions or chime in. So just keep that conversation going. And
I do think it's important that we all have a community. And I think that's what's so special about what's happening right now with the pandemic, and allowing us to not be so confined by our physical location. And so I think that very much our community starts right here in this chat, in this conversation, in this meeting on Zoom, so we can have resources that we talk to each other about. I just want to encourage that this is definitely a conversation. We're not here being the knower of all information. We are just going to speak from our experience. Because that's all we can do. That's all that we have known is the life in our own bodies. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So Maureen and myself, we're sisters. We grew up dancing and training together with a lot of the same teachers and a lot of the same styles. And we have been teaching together as a team since 2006,
14 years.
So we've had a lot of time to develop and grow together as individuals and as a couple. And so we're just sharing our experience and what we've learned through that and how we implement that in the classroom.
And with that being said, and keeping this as an open conversation, we, in our dance training, in our educator route, in our choreographer route, and I'm sure that a lot of you have had this experience, and that's what we want to talk about, but we have had maybe barriers or criteria or boxes that we have been put in, one, as sisters, as Latinx,
as women,
as white, as
mixed,
as biracial, as
sexual, as
the skinny girl, the sexy woman, and in all different dance styles. And that showed up for us in, like I said, in our dance training, as an educator and as a choreographer.
Yes.
So we want to talk about how to include this experience, our own, in how to evolve from those barriers, from those boxes, from that criteria, and how we bring that into our studio life, how we bring that into our dance training, our education, and into our choreography. And otherwise, that's not the only things that you can do as a dancer. There's so many roles in this art form.
Right.
And some things, I think, in our own experience really showed up about not being enough of any of those things that we mentioned, or being too much of some of those things that we mentioned, and finding how to have this duality. Yes, I do identify as a woman. Yes, I do identify as Latinx. Yes, I do identify as a white woman. Yes, I do identify as a sexy, sassy lady. Yes, I do. And how I can, and Maggie can not be confined to any of these labels, these boxes, this criteria. Being exclusive and having this fusion to make up my multiplicity, to make up Maggie's multiplicity, to honor that multiplicity. Because I think that's where the duality is, in my personal opinion, is yes, I do identify as these things, but I am not only these things.
Yes. How do you take those? So it's really, the question is, how do you take those barriers or those labels or those things that make it exclusive and include it within your program, within your teaching, within your world, within your collective environment? So that's what we're here to do, is to identify those barriers or labels or whatever you want to call them, and utilize that and transmute it and learn from it and grow from it, and create an inclusive environment for our future, for our students, for the babes.
For the babes.
For the babes. Always for the babes.
It's always for the kids.
All for the kids.
And I think that's something that has been present no matter what. And Maggie and I have been teaching as a team for, like we said, about 14 years now. But something that has been ever present, even though we have evolved so much in our approach to dance education, but something that has always been present is it being about our students. It is always 100% about the students. And I think that's what's really unique about Liberate Artists is, and what Jerry does here is make it about the students. Forever and ever, you didn't even know who Jerry was. She was just like, I'm behind the scenes. I need it to be about y'all. It's not, because it's just amazing that Liberate Artists is giving this platform to also have it be just for everybody. It's for everybody.
Yes. So in speaking in this way and resonating with what it is, something that we've shared here, we would love to invite you to kind of take a minute and think about your own roots, your own past, your own experience that has brought you to this point today, and see if you can identify certain things in your dance world specifically that you have maybe felt restricted in or confined to, and something that, whether you've pushed through it or learned from it or grown from it, or you're still working through it, just take a moment to really think about that barrier, something that kind of, paints you in a corner, so to speak. And we would love to see it if anyone feels comfortable sharing in the chat something that, has been that for you.
And it can be maybe something that you have also put on yourself, or it can be something that maybe a person in power or in a leadership role or your peers have put those labels, boxes, criteria on you. So if you have a minute and you have some time to think, we'd love to see that in chat so we can move through that together.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start off. I am a plus size queer woman with a broken spine. So those are three pretty isolating circles when you're talking about any sort of like convex movement in the dance world.
Right.
High impact movement. So I've definitely been told by teachers like, oh, well, stand in the back and you can watch.
Yes. Thank you for that share. Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and y'all can absolutely unmute yourselves also if you're comfortable with that, if they have that power. I don't know, in the other rooms they didn't have that permission to unmute.
It's an excellent question. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourselves, but if you share it in the chat, I will absolutely give you a platform and voice, I promise.
Yes, we're here to raise those voices and then listen. and hear them.
Because that's what this is about. This is about continuing the conversation and moving the conversation forward. Because we can lecture all day about this and that, but to actually move it forward I feel imperative to have that conversation.
And by hearing each other and giving us that platform, and like I said, that community. That is okay. We love y'all. Maybe take a minute to think about it. It's all right.
Yeah. The other thing is, I know that it can be hard for folks to actually identify their invisible circumstances. So folks may be like, well, it's not my place to speak, or I don't identify as othered because I don't other myself, or they find themselves in communities where they are not othered. Until those communities intersect, that may be something as well. Or the chat is broken, but please, like, folks, you are in a safe space if you do feel safe to share.
Shannon.
Hi, I unmuted myself. I'm so excited. Okay, so I'm my pronouns are she, her. I'm cisgender female, but I work at a very conservative Christian children's studio by day, and by night I work heavily within the LGBT/drag community. I identify as pansexual. So for teachers like me, and I'm white, but I have some other roots, but I am white pretty much. But okay, so at the conservative dance studio, I try to be a voice for equality in a way that is palatable for these kids who have never experienced it. For example, on Martin Luther King Day, I wore a t-shirt with his picture on it, and people didn't know, my students didn't recognize his picture. Okay, they didn't know what he looked like. They had no understanding of like the image of who he was. So I integrated music and lessons about Black history in the foundations of jazz and ballet, not really in ballet, but the movement, but mostly my jazz classes. And at the end of the day, the studio owner came to me and said, that was a really interesting day for you, Miss Shannon. And she didn't elaborate. I just said, I just thought it was fitting. It was MLK Day, we still had classes. So I thought it was a perfect way for those kids who came when they didn't have school, because we always have lower attendance on those type of Monday holidays. So I said, I thought it was a good way to keep them interested and teach them something we don't always do. So there's that. How do we do that without ruffling the feathers of the people who pay us? Secondly, once we've done that, a lot of teachers are expressing a concern about how do we have that extra time. I have to teach all these steps, and we're a competitive studio, and we have to do all this in this hour. How do we have that extra time? Can you illustrate how you would utilize the same amount of time, but just speak differently and use different vocabulary to give the overall lesson that equality and the true roots of movement are as important as the technique? That's all. That's a lot, but that's all.
That's beautiful.
We really appreciate that, Shannon.
And that is what we're going to touch into later in the conversation of how we get to implement these ways. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. And
just wanted to say it straight out before anyone else did it. There it is.
Thank you. Because and what you're doing and how you're showing up is already doing the work. They see you, they know what you're doing, and there's so many ways to do that, I feel like. And you want to share about your...
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to also say, Shannon, I really do appreciate that too, because I think that when people are challenged to go outside of what they already know, I think it allows this uncomfortable space, and sometimes you are received with judgment or hate or fear or somebody else's own experience and their own pain, and that's how they present that when they are given something they are uncomfortable with or that they do not know. So when we're in places of leadership, And this is what I believe everyone who's on this call is, it may be a studio director, owner, arts educator in some way. When we are in places of leadership, it is our job to, again, have this duality and have the control of the classroom, right? Not let it get completely wild, but also have this place of uncomfortability where you're pushing boundaries and you're pushing knowledge into a new space. And I think that is important also to recognize that, yes, I know these things and you also know things, and we can have a conversation about it. And let's have a realistic conversation. I think that's important. And even by just wearing an image on your shirt is thought or conversation provoking. And in my experience, I worked at a studio that was extremely micromanaging, down to, and they hired me as an independent contractor. When you're hired as an independent contractor, you're hired as exactly that, to do your job.
Yeah.
We have some guidelines, but they're not there to tell you exactly what to do. So in the studio that I worked at, I was their hip hop teacher because they hired me for my knowledge and my training and my experience. I danced on a hip hop company in Chicago. I've been doing this dance style from people in the industry, and we both grew up in Chicago. We live in Los Angeles now, but when we're hired for these positions and then questioned and told what to do. So when I worked at this studio, they said, "Can you please play different music in your class? Can you please play top 40s? I could pull up the email in all caps. Can you please do this?" And how I responded was not out of my ego or my hate or pain or trauma or judgment on what they were asking me to do. I responded with, this is something I have knowledge, training, and experience in, and I'm going to offer these students some culture because they deserve to know something outside of what they know. I'm not going to play what's on the radio because that's not what I think is always real hip hop, in my opinion. And that's how I responded to that situation. So it's learning what these barriers are. And it's often, I think, about control.
Yes. And it's how to own your voice. And that's what I think what we're coming into this new age of, like, really owning your voice and not feeling like shamed, like you can't anymore. We can speak up and no one's gonna, we'll see, but I was gonna say,
but yeah, some people might, but you also might find a community like this that is going to support you and raise your voice up and hear you and have a conversation with you rather than say, no, your thoughts are wrong.
Right.
Your way of practicing is wrong.
So go
ahead and read this in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay. I'm tall and broad and was big throughout a lot of my educational journey. I was passed over and for lead roles because I was too big, and in partnering context, I was always a bass or assigned the male parts because of my size. So that is something that is so present. And Maureen and myself have experienced teaching everyone from all kinds of shapes and sizes. And I think that starts in the classroom. It starts with who is teaching your students and how are they teaching them, making sure that everybody has an equal opportunity, giving as much attention to every single student and bringing them in the front and bringing them forward, looking at where you're dancing and who's like your leader in that space. And that goes like, who are you hiring as your teachers at your studio? Are they inclusive? Because that is something that a lot of people run into, and especially in the dance world. And I feel like now you see people that are being given more opportunity. I'm recalling Lizzo's most recent performance where she had all kinds of shapes and sizes up there with her. And that's becoming, we're breaking barriers right now is what we're doing. And you can only break those barriers once you know that those barriers are even there in the first place to be broken,
By identifying those barriers. And I think also identifying in a leadership role, I cannot tell you how many times I've been in a studio and they say, okay, leg extension over here, turners over here, jumpers over here, I don't know, over here. Yeah. And that's just,
tall ones in the back.
That's just, again, tall ones in the back. And that's just creating these confines, these restrictions, these barriers, and giving them power instead of giving people of all shapes, sizes, gender identifications, everything, economic freedoms, all of this age, and saying, let's see how we can get this leg up. And in dance, it is a physical practice, and I think the importance of it is body anatomical positions. So if I'm going to tell you to drop your pelvis and rotate your thigh to get that mobility to get your leg up, that's very different than saying your leg isn't going to get up, it's not there, let's find the girl who has the most open hips, or the dancer. The dancer. And I think that it's when you say those things, even in your teaching as a leader, you need to be aware of that and giving feedback that's constructive and helpful to allow people to explore and investigate these ideas of multiplicity in their body. Just because somebody said this person's a turner, maybe they're always going to be a beautiful turner. But maybe they have
cutting that other person short of possibly being a turner ever in their life, you know? You're like, oh no, I just do hip hop. And then you don't ever explore any other style of movement, you know? And yeah, so I think that that's a really good point. Let's see this. Identities intersect for me. Female street dancer, often hard to be heard or feel like expressing around the toxic male energy of certainly not all events. / bigger body than a lot of dancers in contemporary and ballet world, so have to deal with that body shaming from dance forms that are often more well represented / funded / taken more seriously. Finally, white presenting but have a culture. I am Italian American. Still unpacking that one. Lastly, let's unpack. That's what we're here for. Lastly, can big difficult to get adequate and safe health care for injuries. Doctors are often male, terrible or inappropriate bedside manner and tell us to stop dancing.
Definitely.
We are coming through a new paradigm right now, y'all. Like we are being birthed. So, and let these feminine energy rise. I am experiencing this as well, being someone that is bringing life into this planet right now. And I think that goes to say, like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you, choosing to be in your circle,
But it's also looking for opportunities, and it's not always accessible, right? Because of thank goodness that we can all have Zoom. I'm so pleased that we all have decent Wi-Fi and we can be on this call together. But that is not the case for so many folks. And so if we're looking for opportunities that aren't male dominated or in a harmful situation, not even just male dominated, just in a harmful situation, whether that's with words, actions, or behaviors. And language is such an important thing too. I worked with somebody on my hip hop company that I danced with. It was brilliant man. He is so creative, but he happens to be really aggressive and he has evolved, thank goodness, but he used very aggressive and harmful language towards his company members and kept us really, really late at rehearsals when we had to be at, our school the next day. He taught most of us at the school that I went to, Columbia College in Chicago. And we all had ballet at 9 a.m. and he was keeping us to rehearsals until 2 because he was a perfectionist and didn't really take into a fact that he had a mainly female cast taking the CTA, the train, at 2 a.m. by themselves. Yeah. And that wasn't really accounted for. And so finding these situations like forward movement, thank goodness, Jerry Brown, thank goodness for Liberate Artists, that this can be free and that we have a safe space to have these conversations and to feel supported and to find a new way to do that. And we're here to realize what these barriers are and to see how we can put them into practice and see where we can find these circles of support.
And with speaking about it, you're already opening yourself up for the conversation now. When we don't speak and when we just kind of like keep it to ourselves and maybe bury those barriers, it doesn't allow us to even identify them, to work through them, to say, oh, wait a second, I don't vibe with that. Actually, I want more than this. And then that can lead you to do your own investigating what that looks like and who and where you want to be and what you want to be and how you want to be that. It's so important.
It is so important, and to recognize those things is only going to reflect in your leadership roles, is only going to affect how you are showing up as a dance educator and how you're being in a person of power.
Yeah.
And how that's, so what Maggie and I have always done, we said it's, however we've been teaching, it's 100% about the students, it always is, but we have given different types of dancers, however they identify or whatever these ideas of multiplicity make them up, we've given them different opportunities. And if you don't give those opportunities to the students, maybe they don't feel the confidence to identify what those barriers are.
Right.
If you don't give them the platform and the safe space. And I think something that that I saw a hummingbird outside and I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry.
We get weird about birds.
I love the birds. But I think that if you give those folks a platform and a safe opportunity, I think it starts with you and identifying your barriers and how to move through them and transmute them and make them into something different. It's something that we talk about a lot. I talk about my multiplicity in my teaching all of the time because I teach a lot of different dance styles. I'm trained in a lot of things, and that became a barrier for me in my dance performing career, because I had been trained in so many different styles. And I would often, when I moved to Los Angeles, a lot of other folks that I danced with in college or that I danced with on my hip hop company moved to Los Angeles around the same time as me, and watching their careers and going on tours and all of these things. And I was like, gotta make money. I'm going to keep teaching. I'm going to do all these things that I know. And luckily we've landed a really wonderful opportunity to keep teaching. And that's
also, I was going to say, and also not even realizing that like teaching is so gratifying, and teaching is so, it's a part of what we have done and loved, and to brush it to the side and to say, oh, well, I should be here and I should be doing that, when in reality, what you're doing is setting the platform for so many people to continue to move forward. And to me, it's been the most satisfying career path, is to be an educator and to be so much for so many people and to watch them continue to grow. It fuels me. It fuels me so much. And that's kind of goes into say with like, where are you dancing? Where are you putting your energy? Are you putting your energy into these other people that aren't necessarily seeing you for all that you are, you know? I'm going to get to this next one more. I'm an African-American woman, educator, and choreographer work. Outside of the private studio setting, I do see an expectation to create work that speaks to the AA experience. At times, that's what I feel, and other times, I just want to create movement that isn't pigeonholed to my appearance.
Can we talk about fusion?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is actually a wonderful pivot into what we're going to go into. And I think that it is so important because, and the idea of multiplicity, the idea of having all of these things that maybe you do identify as, but all of these other things that still make up you as a being, as a human. And that goes to say, like, people that have broken barriers and paved the way in dance in America, we're going to keep it to that specific scope, was Black folks, was people that came as enslaved people from African culture. And African culture is a social formation. It very much is. And dancing is a social formation. It's a way of connecting and celebrating. A lot of folks think only I'm saying I've heard this. I'm not saying this is the finality of anything, but a lot of folks identify African-American dancing as a way to allow your pain to be put into body embodiment. And I think it is so much more than that, because it's for births, it's for marriage, it's for celebration, it's for
finding a
weddings,
mate.
finding a mate. Yeah. It's a social formation. So the idea of having enslaved folks come over to this country and having to adapt their cultural practices and fuse it with these colonial practices, and how they overcame these barriers, how people had to overcome these barriers in enslavement. And I think that's the idea of fusion and adaptation.
Right.
because all of these dance styles are fused from from African social tradition.
So it not necessarily has to be this is this one experience, but what have I learned from my experience and how can I evolve from that? You know, you go back to just like people that were
drumming.
The ban on drumming that was, you know, implemented in these slavery times, and now you see how people, if you can think, what styles have evolved from not being able to drum and instead beating it on your body. You know, you think of stepping, you think of tap dance, you think of other styles that have evolved from something else that, you know, unfortunately some people don't identify and say, oh, that comes from this, you know, or even know that it comes from that. But that's why I think it's important to have these conversations so that you can respect and honor the past and the roots and the history, while making it your own experience and something new.
And that goes, I think, again, in your position of leadership, in your role of a person in power who's educating, who's maybe that's not all of you, maybe not all of you are teachers, and that is okay too. But I think it's really important to, when you're choreographing or when you are having your own movement exploration, is to honor the lineage of these art forms. And so Maggie and I, do you want to talk about what we do and why we're talking about this?
So we shared some articles in the chat earlier, and we kind of focused primarily on, we're talking about all kinds of barriers here, but Maureen and I focus primarily on racial barriers. Maureen and I are professors at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and we have had the opportunity to kind of develop a hip hop program within that university, something that was not there before we came. They have crews, and they have, it's kind of like, we get to create more, which is what has been very satisfying for us. So what we shared today is specifically on racial barriers, but knowing that this exists. Gender barriers, I mean, we talked about it, you know,
age, body type,
yeah, all kinds. So
economic freedoms, yes.
So we kind of just wanted to touch base on ways that people have taken their experience and taken their barriers and transcended it and evolved from it and have
found
grown.
Celebration in it.
Yes.
It isn't all just about our hate and anger and pain. It really is not. I truly feel that in my experience and out of my privilege, yes, but also out of my practice and training in these dance styles. You have to honor. So when we're doing these things and when we're choreographing and when we're teaching, we have to reference this lineage. So these resources that we shared with you are just things to get it going.
Yeah.
We're not here to lecture you on these resources, but it's to encourage you to dig deeper,
right,
to know where these dance styles are coming from, and to have that be present in your own experience and as an individual and as a collective.
Because you can go in and take a hip hop class and have the time of your life, which is what we get to do. We get to teach hip hop. But if you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it or where it even comes from, you know, you're missing an opportunity there. So we've really had we've had the opportunity to share in these things, in these ways with these students.
Yeah.
So what do you want to say?
Well, it's hard. Well, I just want to go back a bit to the idea. And also, y'all, if you have any comments or anything, please just feel free to use the chat. I really, really appreciate everyone who shared about barriers. That is not an easy thing, like Shannon said. It's not an easy thing to identify and then let alone share with a group of strangers. So thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we see and hear you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And it got the conversation going. But this idea of fusion, of overcoming barriers and having to adapt, right?
So this is great. So she has the first one pulled up here, the daily cost one, which is written by a fantastic
Denise Oliver Velez. She's amazing. Mm-hmm. She's a part of the Black Panther. She's a member of Black Panthers. She's really, really special person, and she's an activist. But in this article specifically, she talks about from enslavement, from African culture through enslavement, and then through the late 1800s and the 1900s, and how that has transformed. So what really resonates with me is the fusion, is the adaptation, is the overcoming of this. And I think that's what's really important, is what are these barriers and what are we going to do and how are we putting them into practice in our dance spaces?
Yes.
Right? And how are we including these stories so we can have colorful education? And Jerry likes to use the word colorful, not in a term of skin. That's not what colorful means to liberate artists. Colorful means everybody,
every spectrum, on the
every
spectrum.
single body. Yeah, everything is on a spectrum, in my opinion. And so is dance.
Yes.
So, and how are we going to present that in a colorful way?
And I think we touch base on the minstrel shows in there. And if you're familiar with the minstrel shows, there's such a rich history there. And talking about giving people a platform that didn't have a platform. So many people came up through that, the Master Juga, right? And like being able to tour and be seen, and how people were able to, you know, take being stereotyped and make it, they had to go through some time to figure that out, you know, to be able to then be dancing with Shirley Temple in Hollywood, you know? So it's like watching, you're taking your barriers and you're literally like saying, okay, I'm going to suffer through this. I'm going to learn, oh, this is different. Okay. And now I get to do whatever I want with it, you know? And that's kind of like what Maureen and myself are sharing, is like taking our roots and taking our experience and learning from it and growing from it.
Yeah. And I think I'm just going to read one thing from this first article from the KOS, Daily KOS article, and it's about the minstrel shows. So minstrel shows, through plays, jokes, and musical numbers, including songs and dances, relied on the exploitation of African American stereotypes and presented racist images of Black people as unintelligent, as well as displaying a sentimental view of the world of plantation slavery. This poster for Oliver Scott's Refined Negro Minstrels depicts many of the stereotypes that were standards for the minstrel shows, including toms, mammies, coons, pickaninnies, all of which portrayed African Americans as comic sources of amusement. For generations, these remain the standard stereotypes of African Americans in film, radio, and television. Oh, you're so great. Look at this. Shannon said, look, here's the quote.
Yes.
Yes. Good job, Shannon.
Thank you.
Yeah, right here. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. I probably moved it around a little bit, but yes. Wow, look at that. She got pulled up and everything. That's so awesome. But moving through that, I want to also acknowledge that it was, so much of it was this comedic act, right? It was making fun of these folks, and I think people said, you know what, if you're going to give me a platform, I'm going to perform, because one, it's in my roots, it's in my experience, and I'm going to transform this. I'm going to adapt this into a practice, and I'm going to be seen, even if y'all think that, you know, it's funny. This is how I express myself. And going off that, I think it is important too, like, in freestyle and improvisation is really unique, because it's just an exploration of how your body wants to express and how your body wants to communicate. So sometimes it looks silly and sometimes it feels weird. And that's what's really interesting, I think, about teaching young folks, because they maybe don't have these boxes or criteria or labels already put on them. Mm-hmm. So when you ask a 6-year-old to go shake their body, it looks very different than when you ask maybe a 16-year-old, right? And having this, but that's because of this way that society has presented this information and how you should have your experience. Right. I'm going to tell you how you should have your experience, instead of allowing the space for you to do that on your own. Yeah. But even going through that in Black Vaudeville, so like that circuit is so special, because I think a lot of that shows me, thank you. A lot of what I know about Black Vaudeville is really interesting because it was such a celebration. A lot of those acts were comedy acts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the ones that got to tour and have this wonderful success were all of these things saying, oh, you're going to make fun of our experience. I'm going to make fun of how ridiculous that is. So these acts in Black Vaudeville were a lot of them that had a lot of the long runs were these comedy acts and a celebration. It's not just about the pain and trauma. It really isn't. And when you attach people's oppression to them, that's not really fair either. You cannot have all of these things to attach to, because then it just offers the people that are in that experience to attach to those things.
Right. And it's also, vaudeville is a beautiful place where tap dance really came about, which is also a fusion of not just African dancing, but also Irish dancing, which was clogging, which is a fusion of two completely different cultures that said, hey, we celebrate this way, let's move our feet, let's dance like this. And similar with modern, was also a fusion of African mixed with a lot of white dancers that was already coming to the circuit.
Yeah, and also the reason, I don't know who has experience in modern dance here, but the reason that we dance to drums is in modern dance is because of Asadata Defora, this person who lived in Sierra Leone. But actually, Asadata Defora has a really interesting history and background because he moved all around Africa, and he also had a lot of time in Europe too. So he had these different experiences, multiplicity, right? He had all of these different experiences and ideas so that when he moved to the United States, he could bring this idea of drumming and bringing African practice back into dance in this way. So that's why we dance to drums in modern dance, because of Asadata Defora and his influence and that idea.
Right. And then you also see people like Arthur Miller, who created their own dance studio, for people of color to be seen on, in a ballet kind of a way. So we've got if you look back, you can see it from literally so many different styles. Every different style has been a fusion here. I kind of want to look into this.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. But I think it is important, like people like Arthur Mitchell that have created a space for Black and brown dancers to study safely and how that's changed. Because that Dance Theater of Harlem was opened in 1969.
Yeah, right after MLK was assassinated.
Yeah. My mom danced with Dance Theater of Harlem.
Really?
Yeah. She was part of their ballet company.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
Look at that. And that space has changed so much. Yes.
Alvin Ailey. Come on.
Right?
Yep.
See, and these are things, and those names, Alvin Ailey and Arthur Mitchell, these are, I think bigger names, or people like Debbie Allen in Los Angeles or Luna Washington. These are folks that are more well known. But do we know about like Master Juba? Are we teaching about Catherine Dunham? Are we
Pearl
teaching
Primus?
Or Pearl Primus?
Pearl Primus, who literally brought African dance back, was it trained in protesting performances and then went to Africa, comes back and is like, no, I'm just going to dance this style and I'm going to teach this. And I think that's so fantastic, that people had the opportunity to do that and say, no, I want to do more. I'm here to fuse more and I'm here to bring more forward. Alvin Ailey. He also had a wonderful advocate for him, a white man, Lester Horton, who gave him the opportunity, who then ended up bringing this whole new multiracial dance company forward, which was the catalyst for Alvin Ailey to be like, oh, someone here sees me. Oh, I get to be seen. Oh, now let me start my own company. It comes from these barriers, and then you give yourself this opportunity and you can really evolve from that.
Yeah.
So looking at time-wise, we want to just kind of bring this. Yeah, we kind of want to bring. How do you feel?
I feel. Yeah, you're right. I'm like.
So I know we could literally talk forever about this.
We also just to let you know, there's nothing. The secret is there's nothing in this room after this. Everything is in the creators room, dance class-wise. So if you're participating right now and you do want to leave for a dance class, that's fine, but it's like a soft 5.
Lovely. Soft 5. I love that. Thank you. So coming kind of back to what we were touching on earlier about your programs, about the programs that are in place right now, just kind of looking at your programs, we want you to think about how are you giving access? How are you giving access to your students, to your community? Like, what is the accessibility you're giving to your students? Who's teaching your students? Are you sticking with the same people that teach jazz, tap, and ballet, and like all of these other styles
to the same students every year?
So we just kind of want to leave this question like open for everyone to kind of chime in on, of what are you doing to give accessibility to your students, or how can you maybe move forward from this conversation and bring that to your
I think it's also important. I think it's also important to identify folks in your community, or identify yourself as a person in your community who are breaking barriers and making these opportunities happen. People in my direct community are No One Art House. This is an art house that was created by 3 Black folks, and that's their name is called No One Art House, right? And that's because they felt like no one was giving them opportunities and no one was seeing them. And they've started in 2013, right when I moved to Los Angeles, and it was cool to kind of see them start in the beginning. But they have they were a little discouraged because everyone who's taking their classes are a bunch of people that don't look like them. And they wanted to offer this opportunity as a safe place for a colorful dance education. But I reference No One Art House all the time because they are industry leaders. They are people that are doing different things. That's how I feel about Liberate Artists also. But knowing where those places and who those people are, and can you be that in your community? So how are you giving access to your students? Who are the people that are around you that you can welcome into your dance space?
Yes. And now No One Art House is like choreographing for Solange. No big deal.
For real. No big deal.
Talk about evolution.
Or my Kayla Taylor, who started the TL Collective in Los Angeles, and she fuses all of her dance training. She's a fierce, fierce ballerina, also a strong woman of color. She's a fierce ballerina, but she has a lot of hip hop technique and information in her body. So she fuses these things and said, I'm going to do whatever I want. She made up her own movement vocabulary that is outside of Gaga work from Batsheva, from Oh Heart Nahareen, a white male.
And we also included in this chat, you can see here the Huffington Post article. It highlights, is it 26?
Yeah.
26 women of color that are, choreographers, dancers, that are movers and shakers. So if you want to take a peek at that also, just as a...
Yeah, and if you do want to put it in the... Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Shannon. But if you guys do want to put it in the chat, just as a use of resources for ourselves too, how are you giving your studio or your students or your company access? What are you doing?
Are you offering scholarships? Are you, I've had a student that I found out she was paying for her own dance classes, and I didn't ever know that. And she wasn't able to participate in a dance recital because buying a costume would have cost too much money. So she was keeping it all from her parents. I ended up being like, okay, well, I'm gonna buy your costume, not saying that everyone has the funds to do that, but it was what I could do at the time to keep her passion alive, to keep her involved in dancing.
And that's also a point that our studio didn't have that available. Where we were teaching, our student didn't have that scholarship fund or
right.
resources to pay for folks' recital costumes if they didn't have the means.
Right.
So Maggie just was kind and happened to have that availability when she was younger, but that shouldn't be always what it is, an individual. It should be a group collective, in my opinion.
Yes. Thank you.
I have one that is cost $0. Just basically letting students know that you're accessible and open. Like if the family can't afford it, that you have an open door policy to kind of start those conversations.
Yes.
That's one.
Thank you. And I loved what Shannon had mentioned earlier too, about wearing MLK on her t-shirt. You know, just showing I am an ally, I am someone that sees you, that you are not invisible or no one to us, you know, just being an ally in that way. I think that that kind of leaves room as well.
And these practices can be small starts of action, but it needs to be actionable change. It needs to be every single day, outside of this meeting time, outside of this 50 minutes that we've had together. It needs to be present in how you're giving your own body information and how you're sharing that information.
Yes. So look at your programs, look at who's teaching your students, look at the music that you're dancing to, listen to it, you know. Yes, history of dance and including people of color. When you know, if we'll play a song, Maureen and I love to do like just a whole day focused on the LGBTQ community, like within our program. And we will play just even the music that we play, but like showcasing music videos of these people, like showing, like, you know, making sure that each perspective is represented and how we can highlight that, how we can like give that a voice so people know, you know, that you're not just dancing to top 40 music here, you know. Let's see, adding pronouns to all studio media to normalize gender spectrum and show allyship. Normalizing, y'all, it's so important. It's so important. Like just making sure that people know that you are seen, that you are not an other, you are a human being, you know, experiencing this life worthy of all of the goodness. Worthy of being in the front, worthy of, you know, not being put in the back or being put off stage.
Or just put off stage for the whole dance.
For the whole dance, and then you come out to help someone lift something, you know, like, so just making sure that you're really highlighting everybody and that you're being as inclusive as you can, and recognizing where your barriers are and saying, oh, wait, am I creating barriers for other people without realizing it because I'm holding this within myself. You know, so really taking the time to look at your own roots, to look at where you feel you are painted into a corner, and allowing yourself to move through that. Have made it a point to hire diverse faculty to make every dancer who attends our events feel represented. Additionally, our events incorporate technical, urban, and cultural dance to show that all genres are valid expressions that possess their own technique. Thank you for doing the work. That is beautiful.
With me.
And that right there is exactly why we're here to have this conversation. That's exactly why we're here, because Maureen and myself, like we shared in the beginning, we can only share from our experience, but this is a conversation that is not stopping here, you know, so keep having this conversation with one another, keep learning from one another, keep sharing how you're doing this and looking at other programs, and put your money where your heart is. You know, what are the dance competitions that you're bringing your kids to? You know, what are those people involved in? And yes.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Yes. Okay. If you need to boogie,
we will absolutely.
And we're going to wrap it up here, but thank you so much. It has been an honor to share and hear from all of you. And this is the work. This is it right here, is literally like having this conversation and moving forward and growing together.
And building community and a safe space so that you can acknowledge your own experience and bring that to your collective.
Because it's here. It's here now. It's here. It's happening. We're in it. We're in the conversation. You know, it doesn't have to be so stagnant anymore. All different. Everything is available.
And I love what you were saying. First of all, thank you so much for all of your insight and the labor that it took to put this together, and the time that you shared with us, and the life you're creating. It's all A+. But I also wanted to mention, you were talking about those steps for actionable change, and that is exactly what Liberate Artists is asking of the studio owners, the list of actionable changes that you take away from these conversations. So exactly like you said, it starts here. It's not like our conversation's over, I participated in that, I now get a star. It is the beginning. So we hear that and we see that.
Thank you. Thank you for that share. Yes. Yes. Oh, what a great convo. We get to keep having these convos. We get to keep having them. So keep having them with your students, keep having them with your community.
Having them with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jerry, thank you so much for
Yeah,
having
thanks
us.
for having us, y'all.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to point out, Danielle is, so Maureen and I are actually working on a project together, which we're going to kind of share now. She's led the charge on, we feel like the reason why change isn't happening in a way that is as progressive is because people don't have the data. And so Mo has kind of led the charge in researching pretty much every dance competition, dance convention, and looking at the data of what they are doing visibly to ensure that dance is equitable for all. And we're going to be releasing this information in August because we have talked about this. We come up from a place of compassion, not from a place of you're wrong, you don't, like, that's not how growth happens. Well, that sometimes it does, but that's not the approach that we're starting off with. And so Danielle is the only dance convention that meets automatically our standards for equity and inclusivity. She's the only one. There's one more competition, but she's a convention. And the work that you do is, I mean, you're amazing. I'm so glad to meet you. I was like, oh my gosh, she's on the call. And it's so important because it's simple changes that can be done in these convention and competition settings that just make it say, like, we're for everyone. Like, make sure that your social media is not monolithic. It shouldn't look like just like the same folks, you know? And let's have kind of a course of action then to help support you. So we're going to be launching the Dance Education Equity Association, which is going to be releasing standards for equity and inclusivity that we can all kind of abide by. And like, I think the thing with COVID, and I think a lot of people felt this way, was that there was no like committee or standards that were set. Because if everybody could just follow the same rules, we'd be like, dope, cool, like, that's great. But with equity and inclusivity, and we can follow the same guidelines and standards. And then we can encourage parents and families to put their dollars in organizations that care about all students. Because it's a financial thing. And if you want change, you need to put your dollars into organizations that are changing. Allison, we are going to be, come to my talk on Thursday, and I will be sharing all of that information with you. And Danielle will be there. I just love saying your name. I say it like Danielle. Momo will be there. And honestly, Lindsay, it's so awesome to have you on today. You have such a great face, and I'm just like, you're so receptive. Thank you. All day too. But on all of you, like, thank you for your time. I didn't mean to hijack their sign off, but I wanted to share that with you because this is not work that will be done by one organization or one group. It's a collective action that we all must take, and we all must be receptive and open to. So I thank you for being a part of this, and the viewers that are watching, wherever you may be, come join us on Friday or Thursday. Sorry, I keep doing that. And Mo is going to be using what she taught in class today for her house dance class. She's going to be incorporating some of the things that were talked about today. So come join her on Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. In the creators room for house dance. It's going to be really, really fun. House is something that I feel like is not really taught in studio, but it's really it's like, nope. But yeah, it's really awesome. So I will hand it back to Maggie Mo.
Yes, that's our roots. House music, house dancing, Chicago, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wish I could boogie around. I am slow moving these days. Very slow moving.
The baby's coming like tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much. This has been such an honor, really. And keep this conversation going and keep dancing and feeling good in yourselves. It's so important, especially right now as we transmute through this time. Right?
Absolutely. And thank you again for all of the insights, the labor, and it's just extraordinary. The last question, what's y'all's socials if you have them?
Yes, here, I can type them in here.
Perfect. And then there is nothing else happening in this room right now. all of the classes that are present on your schedule are happening over in the creators room. So we actually have a block of about a 3-hour rest in this room, but starting in 26 seconds is the contemporary class, followed by your contemporary jazz, followed by your hip hop grooves. You can find your schedule over there. And then we will see you hopefully tonight for a guided conversation on with Erica Lynette Edwards. And again, Maggie, Momo, everyone who has been here to have these important and critical conversations. Thank you. I'm not closing this room because I will leave up the graphic that like sends folks over to the appropriate rooms. So feel free to leave the meeting whenever you are ready. Thank you, everyone.